Mike DeSantis, who is an articling student here. And Mike has just collaborated on a new study about the credit card industry and particularly its effect on low-income Canadians. Can you tell us, please, Mike, what the gist of your study is and what the gist of the report's findings, who your collaborators were, and that kind of thing?
Well, essentially, it's a report that attempts to analyze the state of the market in Canada for credit cards and how the market affects low-income Canadians, newcoming Canadians, so new immigrants, for example, and Aboriginal Canadians. And a previous employee here, Esteban Uribe, did most of the research, and I helped write the report. And we just sort of exposed what's going on right now in Canada and how these groups are affected by the credit card industry.
A credit card is pretty much your rite of passage as a consumer and a member of society, isn't it? And and if you can't get a credit card, I guess it's pretty difficult to get along.
That's right. I mean, they're a ubiquitous form of payment. They are the most popular electronic form of payment in Canada, and they're effectively required for a lot of transactions that many consumers undertake. So, for example, if you wanted to rent a car, you need a credit card to do that. If you wanted to book a hotel room, book travel plans online, usually airline tickets, things like that. Even if you want to rent a video at the video store, you need a credit card in order for that to happen. So essentially, they're required for a lot of day-to-day transactions that many Canadians undertake.
You really can't even do business in cash in many of the cases like that, right?
Well, it's interesting you say that because when credit cards first became popular in the 80s, they were marketed to merchants as a way of increasing your business in the sense that you would bring in more customers if you accepted credit cards, whereas now the reverse is true, where they basically tell merchants if you don't accept credit cards, you're going to forego all these sales because people are not going to frequent your establishment and they're not going to shop with you because they prefer to pay by credit card. So you're effectively losing money as a merchant if you don't accept them.
Now, if you don't have a job or if you haven't had a job for very long, it's almost impossible to get a credit card, right?
A conventional credit card does require a credit check that will check your credit history. And essentially, if you don't have a history of employment or you have a very spotty employment, you've been employed kind of in a regular fashion, it's going to become very difficult for you as a consumer in order to get your hands on one because that's how the borrowing, the bank's borrowing decision is made is basically based on your credit history and not really anything else.
So low-income Canadians, new Canadians, young workers, what are they doing for lack of being able to get a credit card now? How are people managing?
Well, our research showed that there was a number of different options that are available to them if they're not able to qualify for a conventional credit card, but none of them are nearly as good as having a conventional credit card. In many cases, some of them actually have friends or relatives undertake the transactions for them. And that's maybe not very convenient for a lot of people, or some people might not have people that are able to do that for them. In other cases, we found that there's two comparable products. There are what are called prepaid credit cards, and then there are also credit card issued gift cards, which are similar to a store issued gift card, but they're usable at any merchant that accepts one of the major credit card brands. In both cases, we found that neither one of those options is a good option for low-income consumers, particularly. The prepaid credit cards actually involve very high fees for transactions, for all kinds of things that are normally included in the without fee for a conventional card, whereas the prepaid cards expire after a short period of time and charge maintenance fees to the point where after a year of actually acquiring one, all the money that's on that card that remains at the end of that year is forfeited and the card is canceled. So you basically have a limited amount of time in order to use that card in order for it to actually work.
What does the interest amount to on these kinds of prepaid fees? Have you been able to compute that? What kind of interest low-income people are paying on these prepaid cards?
The prepaid cards are a bit tricky because they charge interest on in different sort of ways, as opposed to charging interest like a conventional card where you pay interest on a balance. They effectively charge fees for different transactions. So a prepaid card will not charge interest because the money that you're spending has already been provided to the issuer. But the problem is that the card that you're using costs money for you to acquire. There's a monthly maintenance fee that applies whether you use the card or not. In many cases, there's a charge per transaction. So every time you use the card at a merchant, for example, you're going to be paying for that. If you have a problem with the card and you call for customer service, there's a fee involved for that. In many cases, if you want a physical paper statement mailed to you, there's a fee involved for that. And most of these services that are offered by conventional credit cards don't incur any charges to consumers. So it's very lucrative for the issuers, but a very difficult situation for low-income consumers.
What kind of remedies is your report recommending then?
Well, we recommend that a bit less credence be paid to by issuers anyway to credit card reports. Credit reports. We believe that that shouldn't be the end-all, be-all for credit decisions. We also think that consumers should have an option to use a payment system, electronic payment system that's similar to a credit card, but does not actually involve the use of credit. So, similar to, say, a debit card, there are similar products available in different countries where there are debit cards that are branded by major credit card issuers that allow the benefit of a credit card without actually having to borrow any money. And we hope that that kind of system could be applied here so that people that are not able to access a conventional credit card through the usual means would be able to make full use of the benefits offered by one.
What are the obstacles to change that you anticipate?
Well, I think with like anything, the financial industry is very large and a bit slow-moving, kind of bureaucratic. Also, our laws in Canada, maybe not necessarily reflect the situation very well for low-income consumers. But I think ultimately we need to make a case that this kind of product would be lucrative for banks as well as for merchants, and that it's a useful thing for everybody and not just for low-income consumers. And I'm not sure that that point's been made quite yet. And we're hoping that with this report that maybe someone will pay more notice and that this issue will be taken more seriously. Because ultimately it's going to depend on whether the issuers are interested in issuing this card, to help low-income consumers and the like.
Is there a parallel here? Maybe I'm stretching a point, but is there a parallel here with the gamine banks and the whole idea of microcredit, that if you extend credit to the poor, that they will actually be able to become more engaged in the economy and more productive?
I think you can probably make that point. I think it's a useful resource for anybody, really, that wants to transact in the modern world. But I think more so, it's very useful even just to have, let's say, like a debit card, like I said earlier, a debit card that you'd be able to use at a merchant in order to make those kinds of transactions that would not be possible otherwise. So if your average person wants to rent a car or, book a hotel stay or rent a video or anything like that, that won't be possible without that electronic payment function that a credit card offers. So if there was a way of just separating the actual borrowing function from the electronic payment function, even that I think would be sufficient. You wouldn't even need to lend them the money in many cases in order for them to take advantage of that benefit.
Is there action you're looking to from different levels of government to move forward on this?
Well, we're hoping we'll get the attention of the government and that they'll consider our findings, because ultimately the Federal Bank Act is what would apply in this particular situation, I believe, anyway, and sort of the regulation of the financial industry, I should say. So we hope that this report will maybe give them some food for thought and consider, the state of the credit market and how perhaps some of their constituents are being a bit underserved, and how it's having a major impact on their lives.
What are the next steps for PIAC with this report? Do you have plans to publicize it, to promote it, to win partners?
Well, with all of the reports that we publish, we hope to publicize as well as we can. And we do have some partners that we work with that protect consumers as well as low-income consumers as well. So we make that available to them, and whatever resources we can provide them to help them in their work, we do as best as we can. But every report that we publish, we try to publicize as well as we can, and hopefully people will take notice and change will occur.
Thank you very much, Mike DeSantis.
Thank you.